Hello, I'm Erin Finnegan, your host of the Los Altos History Show. With us this evening is Kathy Peregrine, Executive Director of the California History Center located on the campus of De Anza College. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks for inviting me.
Kathy has been associated with the History Center since 1977, first as an instructional assistant, then media coordinator, and currently as director. Kathy's background is in journalism, and she is a graduate of San Jose State. Kathy has worked both as reporter for the Sunnyvale Scribe and as public information officer for the Sunnyvale Elementary School District. Kathy, since I imagine many of our viewers aren't familiar with the center, can you tell us a little about its beginnings?
The History Center is really an interesting organization, Erin. We are both a nonprofit foundation and an academic department on the De Anza College campus. The California History Center was actually formed in 1967 by a Foothill faculty member and a group of students, and they sort of met informally during the evenings and formed as a discussion group and then to publish their research papers, which was the start of our publishing program.
Oh, okay.
The California History Center Foundation, our nonprofit, started in 1969, and that was a group of community residents that formed a nonprofit to raise money to restore the Trianon building, which is the home on the De Anza land that now houses the California History Center. It took about 10 years and $750,000 to raise the money to restore the building, and once that happened, the California History Center program moved in, and the California History Center Foundation program started raising the money to support the programming efforts of the California History Center.
Okay, and what now is the mission of the History Center in its present state?
In its present state. Basically, we preserve and document history, we study history, we promote the study of history. We are involved in other aspects of history in the Valley in terms of working with other organizations. We really serve as a clearinghouse and a resource center so that we really have evolved into a focal point for history in the Valley.
Now, I visited there this past weekend, and you not only do you have exhibits and programming, but you also have a classroom in the building. Can you tell us a little more about your many programs and services?
The classes are interesting because they really started, the classes we first started to offer were for elementary school teachers in the area, and that was back in 1972. And basically our program has been a real hands-on approach to history. Offered classes in everything you'd ever want to study about California history, whether it was the gold rush or whether it was Victorian architecture. And part of it always has been for the student to experience the historic site. So a lot of our classes, it's not just that you sit in a classroom for a certain number of hours per week, but you go out into the field. If you're going to study the gold rush, you go to the gold country. If you're going to study Victorian architecture, you walk a Victorian neighborhood in San Francisco.
Oh, wonderful.
So the program is really hands-on approach, experiential, experimental kind of thing.
Okay, and what kind of materials, historic materials, do you collect at the center?
Well, we don't have an artifact collection. We have zero storage. One thing, when they moved the building onto its current site, we didn't put a basement in or anything like that. So we don't have an artifact collection. We do house the Louis Stockelmeyer Regional History Library and Archive. And Louis Stockelmeyer was a Cupertino resident who was one of the original founders of the Trianon Foundation, which was the group that formed to save the building. The things that we have in the library are things you won't find in other places. Some of the more unusual things we have a oral history collection of about 400 tapes. And these have been collected over the 25-year history with pioneer families and other people in the valley who participated in the history making of whether it's a business or whether it's land ownership or whatever it is. We have probably 10,000 photographs. We have 2,500 student research papers that over, again, the 25-year history of the academic part of our program, students taking California History 10, which is our general survey class, have written research papers. And a lot of it was primary research. They went out and interviewed the historic person, or they went out and did first reference research projects. And so all of these were cataloged, and now they are accessible for other people to come in and use.
Do they apply to the whole state or just the valley, or the collection covers most of California? Well,
we sort of see ourselves as focusing in first on West Valley area, so that would be, you know, Palo Alto, Los Altos, Cupertino, Sunnyvale on down. And then we broaden out to Santa Clara Valley and County, and then Northern California, and indeed the state. We really do see ourselves as a regional history center, as opposed to what an individual town's historical society kind of thing.
Now, is the center open to the public, and this collection open for research weekly, or?
The center is open, yes, free to come in. There is no fee to come in the History Center. We're open Monday through Thursday, 8 to noon and 1 to 4:30. The library is open in the same hours. If you're a member of the California History Center Foundation, you get to use the library for free. If you are not, there's a $3 use fee. But also, any student, whether it's an elementary school student or a De Anza student or a Stanford student, students also have access to the library for no fee at all.
Whether they're taking the classes or not.
Whether they're taking the classes or not. If they're a student in any school, in any part of the area, they're welcome to come in and use the collection. And we actually do get, of course, at the 4th grade level, they study California history, and so we get a lot of 3rd and 4th graders coming up and doing their research on the gold rush or the California Indians or the local community. So we get a lot of students, all ages, little to tall.
A regional center is so needed. Now, as we're talking about publications and your research collection, I know that you've brought several examples to us, if you wanted to tell me a little about that.
Publishing is another program area of ours. We are a local publishing house, but we also publish the Californian magazine, and I brought several of them for you to look at. We publish the Californian 3 times a year, and this is a benefit of membership in the California History Center Foundation. Basically, the issues will be, the feature articles will be around whatever exhibit we happen to have in at a time. This one happened to be on John Muir. It was the Sierra Club's 100th anniversary in 1991, so we ran an article on John Muir. The magazine has actually been in existence for 15 years, and it's one of what we feel is one of the quality program areas that we have. So we publish the magazine, but we also publish books. And the latest one is called Sunnyvale, From the City of Destiny to the Heart of Silicon Valley. And our book publication program is the Local History Study Series, and this is number 35. And actually, we published a book in the early 70s called Sunnyvale, City of Destiny. And actually what that book was one of the compilations of student research papers that I mentioned back when the History Center first formed. And so what this was, a young woman doing her master's degree at San Jose State took this on as her master's thesis and came in and took the original book, Sunnyvale, City of Destiny, completely rewrote it, updated it, did new interviews, and we came out with this publication. This just came out in September. And again, another benefit of membership in the History Center, at a certain membership level, you get the publication that comes in.
I was going to ask, and how do you market these various, the Californian as well as the textbooks?
Well, the books are a little, we don't do a very good job at marketing. The books are, it's difficult. We do deal with 2 small distributors. The Californian basically is a benefit of membership. And so that,
it is? Okay.
Right, that goes to members it comes out 3 times a year, so that goes to members. The books, we are distributed through 2, I guess, small book distributors, and then we have them for sale at the History Center also. The other one that we're proud of in particular is the Passing Farms Enduring Values, and this one was internationally acclaimed, and it really is. It's a history of this farming past of the Santa Clara Valley. written by a woman
Wonderful.
who was born and raised on a cherry orchard farm in Sunnyvale.
And
So-
I know I've seen this book at several of the museums in the area, so I
Right.
think you're doing a good job of marketing these in the region you were discussing.
Right.
So that's excellent. Now, do you have any in the works right now?
We actually have 2 in the works and 1 sort of sitting out there. One we're working on, and again, it was a master's thesis for Hayward State, and it is on George Washington Patterson and the founding of Ardenwood. And for any of your viewers, if they're familiar with Ardenwood Farm, it's a historic working farm out off of the Dumbarton Bridge. The other one is a book on the pioneer families of Santa Clara, and that one is hopefully will be out in the next year. Ardenwood should be out by the end of this year. And then maybe sitting out there, we have a manuscript on Greeks in California. And part of our publishing program is that we have to raise the money to support this. So it takes us a while to get a book actually into print, a finished product.
Interesting, though. That's wonderful. And along the lines of this being a regional service that you provide in the publications, I wanted to mention, I know that the History Center has been instrumental in forming the Heritage Council.
Right. That was, I think it was 1989. We decided that really anybody in the history business in the Valley needed to get together. And so we organized and hosted the first networking meeting. And we had historical societies, museums, board and commission people, and out of that grew the Heritage Council. It was really a needed resource, a clearinghouse for small agencies, bigger ones, and we felt really good about being a major player in that.
Wonderful. Now, at the History Center, I noticed that you have your 25th anniversary exhibit up.
Right,
and
right.
I don't know what other exhibits you've had in the past or where you're going with your exhibitions.
The basic philosophy from the very beginning was to have a rotating exhibit program. Okay. And we've mounted about close to 30 since we moved into the building in 1979. The silver anniversary exhibit, the one you saw on Saturday, is the current one in, and that will be in through the rest of this year. But our very first exhibit was on the California Indians, and then over the years we've done the Japanese in California, we've done the Russians in California, we did the history of newspapers in Santa Clara County. Let's see, we did California women's suffrage, the 75th anniversary of women's right to vote in the state of California. And actually they had the right to vote before everyone, all the women in the nation did. They were the 6th state to pass the suffrage mandate. So we've done a lot of exhibits, and most of them, some of them we have and they travel to other organizations, and some even back east or down into Southern California. But the idea is that these exhibits would end up with the organization that helped with the funding of them. Oh. So the Japanese exhibit went into the Japanese Resource Center in San Jose.
Oh, that's great.
And so that was the whole idea, is that we would produce them, have them in our own venue, and then they would be out into a further audience.
Wonderful. Now, I know the History Center has been going through some transitional times.
Anybody who's lived in the state of California in the last few years knows what it's like to be in a recession. And for those of us in education, it's been particularly hard in the last few years. The Foothill De Anza district went through a downsizing process 2 years ago. And we felt the effects of that as well. And our staffing was cut back by 50%. I tend to be an optimist and decided, well, you know, maybe we just need to redefine who we are and where we want to go. And so over this past year, we've been looking at making a transition to a California Studies program, which really, for us, broadens not only our audience, but allows us to get into areas that we really have not gotten into before. It's basically an interdisciplinary approach and a past, present, future approach to studying California. And part of this has been working with other divisions and departments on campus to do things in environmental California and to do things with women in California. So it really is working with other disciplines and other departments and broadening us out.
Will you serve as a classroom then for more and more departments as this takes off, or you'll do outreach programs from the center?
All of that, yes, I hope. It's been a matter of pulling back and reassessing and redefining and saying we can still continue to do what we've been doing, but we need to do it in a simpler way, a more focused way, and actually a more exciting way. I think it's kind of re-energized all of us and brought, I don't know, there you walk in and there's a palpable feel of energy going on and creative thinking, and we have all sorts of ideas of what we want to do, and it's just, the frustrating part about it is saying we know we want to do it and we know we can do it, but there are only so many of us to get it done in this amount of time. So, but we have a forward direction and really want to be a focal point where students and community and faculty and staff can come for intellectual interchange and challenge, and that may be an exhibit, and that may be a lecture, and that may be a book, and that may be a class. But it is all going on so that we all have a better understanding of California.
That's wonderful, and I think that's so much right now the trend in history and in history museums of all sizes is to get more education and outreach and to really modernize not only the collections but the exhibits and bring modern issues into history. I guess history's always in the making. So.
Well, and definitely when you work with students, it's a matter of taking them from where they are, whether it's an environmental issue or a political issue or an immigration issue, taking them from where they are and then setting the historic background and then taking them where do we need to go. And it's a way to involve students as well as community in a way that's maybe a little different from what we're used to. We aren't starting back in the past and setting out, well, here's where we were. It's starting with what's here right now, what's important to you, what's grabbing you. So it's really, as I say, we're a small staff right now, but there's so many ideas and excitement going on. It's just really, it's fun to come to work.
It's
wonderful. I think for all of us.
Well, I could really feel the energy while we were there over the weekend, and I know the viewers will enjoy seeing the History Center, and I hope everybody comes in to see the service. You're a wonderful resource not only for De Anza campus, but for the whole valley.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I really enjoyed learning more about the History Center this evening. The center plays a very important role in preserving and communicating California history. Last weekend, we visited the History Center on the campus of De Anza College. Please stay with us for that tour. I know you'll enjoy it. Let's roll that tape now. We're standing on the De Anza College campus in front of what is now the California History Center, and it's a wonderful building. Kathy, can you tell us a little more about the history of the building?
I'd really like to, Erin, and I'd like to welcome you and your viewers to the California History Center and De Anza College. The building was built by a couple in San Francisco about mid-1890s. We don't have the exact year, and they built it pretty much as a party home. They wanted to come down on weekends, get out of the fog, get out of the cold. And it's about 100 acres that they had here, and Charles and Ella Hobart Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin is an entrepreneur, and they actually built the home where what now is Flint Center sits, and the building was moved. It is a neoclassic French-style pavilion and built by Willis Polk, designed by architect Willis Polk, who was a very famous San Francisco architect at the time. And so they built it, and they actually planted grapevines on the property, and it was a vineyard. And there are several other buildings that are still on the campus that are built in that time as well. The bookstore, our De Anza College bookstore, actually was the winery. And then we have 2 adobe cottages that are off to the side of the Trianon building, and those were servants and guest quarters. So those 4 buildings are still on the college campus and are all historic buildings built in the mid-1890s.
You know, Kathy, you mentioned that the house was moved at some point from where the Flint Center now sits, and I noticed that around that area there's this lovely balustrade. What was the property here used for?
Well, the balustrade actually enclosed the formal garden area, and when the building sat where Flint is, you could look out of the front doors and you had the balustrade and the gardens, and there was a fountain out in the center. But actually the Baldwins had a vineyard here and planted grapevines, and the bookstore did serve as the winery. They did have their wines in a French exposition. But very reminiscent of the last few years in the Napa Valley, phylloxera, which is a louse, a root-eating louse, came through and decimated the vines, and so it was not a vineyard after they left. The Baldwins actually left the estate shortly after 1900, in the about 1902 or so, and moved to Colorado Springs for his health. And there were a succession of owners here up until the Foothill De Anza College District bought the land, and they bought it in about the mid-60s. They wanted to build a second campus. Foothill was built and up and running and growing, and they wanted to build a second campus closer down to San Jose. So the Foothill De Anza District bought the land, and a group of people formed a foundation to raise the money to restore it, and the California History Center moved in 1979.
Wow, interesting. Well, we'll take you through a tour of the campus, and you'll see how nicely I think the modern buildings and the historic buildings blend on this campus. And now, Kathy, can we take a walk inside?
I'd love to.
Great.
This is our exhibit room, and exhibit is just one area of programming that the California History Center does. And the exhibit that we currently have in actually celebrates a 25-year history of the California History Center Foundation. The area that we're standing in talks about the early years here when the building was built, and this is really one of my favorite parts of the exhibit. This is Charles and Ella Hobart Baldwin, the original owners and builders of the building. And we had never had a picture of them before, and as I mentioned earlier, they moved to Colorado Springs after they left here. And so this came to us from Colorado Springs, and we thought it would be fun to blow it up. I mean, they are dressed very appropriately for this building, and blow it up and have the Baldwins welcome people into the exhibit during the course of its run. We also have on display, and I think it's really exciting, the house was featured in a 1902 edition of House and Garden magazine. And so we have on the wall photographs actually out of that magazine. We have Willis Polk, we have the dining room, we have a photograph that was actually taken looking across the sunken garden from where the De Anza Learning Center stands today. And we have each of the rooms here, with the exception of the room we're in, actually. We do have a library and archive here. It's always been a personal library. We have a photo of the center room, and what's interesting about the center room is it was their bedroom. And then we have a picture of actually the blueprint from that time that shows where the house was sitting, the wine cellar, which is the bookstore today, and then the servants' quarters. When people visit the exhibit, there are basically four components to the exhibit, the early years that I've just been telling you about. And then we get into the restoration phase, and there was a group of community that formed a nonprofit foundation and raised the money to restore the building. And so we have an area in the exhibit that talks about the forming of what was then known as the Trianon Foundation. Our other section is about the partnership between the Foundation and the California History Center, which is an academic department on the De Anza College campus, and talk about the early players as well as the most recent players in this whole scenario, these 25 years. And then we also have a section of the exhibit that looks at our future and where we're going. And so it celebrates 25 years, but it also gives a hint of what may be coming in the next 25.
How wonderful. Now, how long is this exhibit scheduled to stay here?
This exhibit will be in pretty much through the rest of the year until about mid-June, and if we are open Mondays through Thursdays, and then we'll be open De Anza Day, which is June 11th. So we always encourage people to come down and visit. We enjoy having people come.
Yeah, and I think it's a wonderful way for people to get to know a little about the California History Center if you haven't ever been here before. It's a nice overview of, like she said, the history right up to the present. In addition to this exhibit, what other services do you offer in this building?
Well, if you were to come here anytime between 8:30 in the morning and 1:30 in the afternoon, it's teeming with students. We do have a classroom in the building. We have a variety of programming. We do tours and events. We do exhibits. We publish books. We have a library and archive. So there's a lot of activity that goes on here. It's very energetic. It's very alive. You wouldn't know that. There's sometimes staff people come in and they open the doors and say, "It's so calm and quiet in here. May I come in and visit?" We say, "You're just not here at the right time." So but we do have quite a bit of traffic, and we enjoy having students come in here too. And they come in with their backpacks and their sandals, and they open the door and say, "Is it okay to come in here?" But we do have students in here regularly, not only in classroom, but utilizing our library and resource center.
A wonderful place.
Erin, I wanted to bring you into this room because it's my favorite room, and there's some really interesting things to point out here. Probably you can notice this is our classroom. We do have tables and chairs here, and we offer all sorts of classes in California history as well as other classes out of the social science division. But what's interesting about this room, when it was decided to make it a public building where students were going to come in and take classes, we had to meet California earthquake standards. And for this building, this room was a particular problem because we have solid wood paneling throughout. We have a curved wall at the end. Well, the main thing about California earthquake standards, it meant for this building we had to lower the ceilings by about 18 inches. Well, that meant we had to cut this wood paneling down by 18 inches. When we have school kids come in and I talk to them about this room, I say, you can sit here for an hour or 2 or 5 or however long and never see where those cuts were made. We had a master craftsman. He was an 82-year-old fellow that came in and actually cut all of these wood panels down.
That's amazing.
We know we did a good job because not only did we live through the 1906 earthquake, we also lived through the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake with no damage at all in this room. We do have a fireplace in this room, and it doesn't work, as none of them do in the building now, but it really is what we see as a very classy classroom on the De Anza campus. We feel like the students who are in here maybe take a little more respect of the room, and we offer some great classes.
That is wonderful. It is, all of the rooms in the History Center are beautifully refurbished, and the wall coverings of the time, and it is amazing. She challenged me to that 2-hour look around the molding, and I certainly haven't been able to see where they cut it yet. I invite everybody watching the show to come on down to the History Center, maybe take a class, explore a little of the history of California, or just enjoy the exhibit. What were the hours again?
We're open Monday through Thursday, 8 to noon and 1 to 4:30, and we can be here on other occasions if need be.
Wonderful. Well, that's the end of our tour today. Thank you so much for joining us and inviting us here, and we'll see you next time on The History Show.